So in the past, I've looked at using the NgFor directive in conjunction with the NgSwitch directive to render a list of mixed data types. So for example, here I have a list of projects, and you can see the projects is made up of either a prototype type or a board type, which have slightly different properties. Prototype uses name, whereas board uses title. So when we render this list, we have to be able to differentiate between the prototype and the board so that we know when to reference a .name property versus a .title property. And again, like I've said, typically I use the NgSwitch directive to handle that problem. But I've been doing a lot of experimentation with templates, NgTemplate and template refs, and I want to see if maybe I could do the same sort of thing using the NgTemplateOutlet. So let's take a look at how that works. So first, let's just set up our data type, right? We have our list of projects. It's either prototypes or it's boards. And again, you can see that prototypes have name, whereas boards have titles. Now let's take a look at the HTML markup. So I render this list twice using my traditional technique and then the NgTemplateOutlet technique. So my typical technique is to iterate over the list of projects and then use the NgSwitch on the particular type. So this uses a discriminated union in TypeScript. And here I'm saying if the type is prototype, you can see I'm using the .name property, whereas if the type is board, I'm using the .title property. And this works really well, and it's proven to be quite effective and performant, and really I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. But again, I've been playing a lot with templates lately, so I wanted to explore this idea of using a template outlet. So in this version, again, we have our NgFor to loop over the projects, but instead of having two switch statements, I have a single NgTemplate inside of my list, and then I'm using the NgTemplateOutlet to drive one of two different templates. So here, prior to the NgFor directive, I have two templates, one for prototype and one for board. And so these essentially replace the two NgSwitch case templates, right? So now these are just standalone templates. And what I'm doing is using the type of the project to drive a sort of short-circuit evaluation of this complex Boolean operation to say that if the type is prototype, use the prototype ref, which is this template, or if the type is board, use the board ref, which is this NgTemplate reference. And then here I have to construct the context that's being used to evaluate these templates, or be able to stamp out these templates. And in this case, I'm passing through the project as the implicit value, which is why I don't have to assign, or I don't have to use an assignee for this. So I just say let prototype as opposed to like let prototype equals project and let board equals project kind of a thing. And when we run this, jump over to the browser, you can see that both the NgSwitch and the NgTemplateOutlet approaches work quite well. They both output the same list. If we look at the markup, we can see slight differences, right? So here's the first P, project prototype P1, and you can see that I have two HTML comments here, and these are placeholders essentially for those two NG templates here, well, specifically for the NgSwitch cases. If we scroll down and we look at our second P1, you can see that this only has a single HTML comment, which is the placeholder for the NgTemplateOutlet. However, you can see that there are two HTML comments prior to the first item, which of course are our NG templates here. So I'm only pointing this out to say that there is a slight runtime difference in how these are evaluated, but we can see that the overall effect is the same for the user experience. Now that I see this on paper, definitely for at least trivial examples, I'm going to continue to use the NgSwitch case approach. It just feels simpler, less noisy, more to the point. It's easy for me to see that I'm inside of an NgFor, and now I'm trying two different internal renderings. But I'm not completely against this approach. I'm wondering if, as these item type renderings become more complex, right? Like if the size of these becomes larger, I wonder if this technique with the NgTemplateOutlet will actually add some clarity, because what this does is it separates out the item rendering essentially from the list rendering. So if you can imagine that my LIs get more complicated here and I have a bunch of like classes and dynamic styles, it could be nice to separate that out, right? Keep this very clear in terms of layout and then keep these more clear in terms of content. So again, definitely in the near term, especially with smaller examples, I'm going to stick to my ng switch, but I'm not ruling this out, and I will continue to experiment with the NgTemplateOutlet for mixed data types, especially when the rendering of the data type itself becomes more and more complex. I think there might yet still be some clarity that this kind of approach can offer. And if nothing else, it's just exciting to see how freaking flexible Angular is and how cool NgTemplate is, and really how much leeway the Angular platform gives us to solving various problems with targeted approaches. And I don't know, I just love Angular, and it continues to impress me all the time.